Since it's noon, I'll go ahead and get us started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Lacey. I am CAM's Administrative and Program Coordinator. I'm going to start us off with just some brief housekeeping. First, just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded and it will be emailed to you and posted to CAM's YouTube channel following the event. Live captioning is available for today's program, and I'll keep sending the link as folks continue to join the call so that they can access the captioning. And our presenter today will answer questions at the end of the program, or at the end of her presentation. And so we do encourage you to please send any questions that you have using the Q&A feature, which you should see at the bottom of your screen, the Q&A icon. And there's also a chat box that we can use. Just remember when you're using the chat box to send your message to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your comment if you want. So I'm going to pass it off now to the chair of CAM's program committee, Tomoko Kuta, to introduce today's program. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lacey. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We've got a really special session for you. I'm going to start off with the land acknowledgement. As we begin this event, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of our various regions. A land acknowledgement is a critical step towards working with Native communities to secure meaningful partnership and inclusion in the stewardship and protection of their cultural resources and homelands. Our institutions were founded upon exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples. We honor and are grateful for the land we occupy and recognize the ongoing damage of settler colonialism. Let's take a moment to honor these ancestral grounds that we are collectively gathered upon and support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide. I am on the traditional territory of the Kumeyaay people. I encourage you to name and acknowledge the Native peoples where you are located in the chat box. Please send it to all panelists and attendees in the chat box so that we can all honor the original inhabitants of these lands. And in the chat box, I believe there is a link to a website, native-lands.ca. So we go to the next slide. Lacey, yeah, great. CAM's free Lunch and Learn webinar program is supported in part by Associated Federations, Inc. in memory of Barry Herlihy. Live captioning is supported in part by the National Arts and Disability Center at the University of California, Los Angeles, and Ability Central. CAM is supported in part by a grant from the California Arts Council, a state agency. Today's Lunch and Learn program, Swipe Up, Bringing Instagram Stories to Life, was originally presented as a workshop at the CAM 2020 conference in Los Angeles in March. It has been adapted for a webinar format, and I am pleased to introduce our speaker for today. Joyce Alcantara is the Digital Engagement Coordinator at the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, the oldest and largest cultural institution in Northern California, as well as one of the top 10 most visited museums in the United States. As the Digital Engagement Coordinator, she manages the museum's social media content calendar and is the lead on influencer partnerships. So take it away, Joyce, then thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'll give you just a moment to pull up my slides for you. Lacey, can you confirm that my slides are up and like no speaker notes?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for spending your lunch hour with me. I'm Joyce, and today we're going to learn how to create impactful Instagram stories. Before we get started, I'm sure that you know this presentation was created in a pre-coronavirus world. There might be things in this deck that won't be explicitly applicable anymore, but I hope that you are still empowered to think creatively. This presentation, the original presentation, was also a 2-hour workshop, so I removed the breakout sessions for today, and instead we'll have 2 dedicated Q&A times in the middle, one in the middle of the presentation and one at the end. Please use the chat box to submit your questions. I'm gonna share some background on myself and the museums, but I'd also love to get to know you all. If you'd like, please say hi in the chat and let me know where you're watching from. About me. I've been with the museum since 2015. Digital engagement is a fancy word we use for social media, but it really illustrates the different ways our team uses social media to interact with our visitors. This topic is very innate to me, and it's part of my daily job responsibilities, so you could say that I live and breathe it. If there's anything that needs clarification, please feel free to ask. Now I'm going to share some background on the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, aka the DeYoung and the Legion of Honor. The DeYoung and Legion of Honor are sister sites in San Francisco and together make up one of the largest arts organizations in Northern California. The DeYoung was founded in 1895. We just celebrated our 125th anniversary in March. And just a 15-minute Uber ride away is the Legion of Honor, founded in 1924. Both museums have something special to offer visitors in terms of their programs, and because of their intimate park settings, they also serve as a peaceful refuge from the hustle and bustle of the city. Now, before we get deep into the topic of Instagram stories, I want to zoom out and take you through our overarching social media strategy. We've used
Joyce, sorry to interrupt. Your sound went out for a second.
Oh.
But it sounds like it's back now. I'm not sure if that was just me or for everyone, but if it was for everyone, if you wouldn't mind repeating what you had just said.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Sure. Let me start from the beginning of this slide.
Perfect.
I said, before we get deep into the topic of Instagram stories, I want to zoom out and take you through our overarching social media strategy. We view social media as the first touch point for our visitors. We don't use social media to drive direct conversions, but we hope each post that we craft inspires a visit. Think of it as breadcrumbs that lead a person to the museum. These breadcrumbs we leave should be nutritious and feed their mind and soul. We try to stay away from serving sugary sweet clickbait content that adds no value to your life. And this is our channel strategy blueprint. This document is our roadmap and tells us which type of content should be posted where. This information is rooted in months of research on our audience. And for us, Instagram stories serves a very defined purpose, and that's to humanize the museum and enrich the visitor experience. Now, how do we distinguish what we post on feed and on stories? We try to keep our feed maintained to a certain level of visual standards and content pillars, but because we're an encyclopedic museum, most of the things in our collection look very, very different from one another. We're not as lucky as the Broad in LA, for example, with their colorful, large-scale pieces hung against their glossy white walls. So we're constantly challenged with keeping our feed looking cohesive. With Instagram stories, however, we can still tell rich stories about the museums without compromising those visual standards. And through stories, we have more creative freedom and more interaction with our followers. Now that you have a better understanding of how we approach social, I'm going to walk you through what to expect in this webinar. In this webinar, we will discuss how Instagram Stories is used across various industries, see how the Fine Arts Museums does Instagram Stories, review basic best practices, go over metrics on stories, and lastly, share resources. Instagram Stories across the industry. In case you need more data to prove that Instagram Stories should be a priority, here are some fast facts for you to take home. 500 million people are on Stories daily. A third of those stories are viewed from brands and businesses. 62% of people say they're more interested in a product after seeing it on Stories. And brands are posting about 2.5 times per week at average. So our team really loves looking to outside of the arts and museum industry for inspiration. Why do we do this? We're not thinking about social, we are thinking about social in a broader context. Our fans are not just museum fans, they're also interested in sports, makeup, travel, etc. So our competition for their attention is not just with other museums, it's with every industry out there. These are just some of my favorite accounts who are doing a great job on Stories. They keep their content themes simple and authentic to their brand. They aren't using Stories for direct conversions, but more so getting followers to buy into their brand DNA. And so these are my favorites. I'd love to hear what brands you think are doing an awesome job on Stories. Let me know in the chat. You can tag them. Now we're going to get into how the Fine Arts Museums does Stories. As I mentioned earlier, our goal for Instagram Stories is to humanize the museum. This is an opportunity for us to go beyond the gallery walls and show off the behind-the-scenes heroes who make this place what it is. Stories are also a great way of capturing on-the-fly interviews with notable people passing through the museum. Here is Mike Krieger, the co-founder of Instagram, at the museum for a speaking engagement back in 2018. We only had 10 minutes with him before the program, so of course we asked him about the most Instagram piece in our collection. And like any organization, one of our main social media duties is live event coverage. But that doesn't mean you have to give viewers a play-by-play of the event. You also want to make it interesting or relevant for the people watching at home. For this event, where museum visitors recreated artist Anna Halprin's blank placard dance performance, I was inspired by the black and white archival images that the artist provided for us and the picket signs that were used in the performance. So I'll give you a moment to just look at the variation in these slides. Whenever Instagram releases a new sticker or a feature, we try to test it within the first 24 hours that it's available. For World Emoji Day, we asked visitors to send us an emoji, and our curators got to select the answers. It was a great exercise in collaborating with curatorial staff, testing a new feature, while also showing off overlooked pieces in the collection. Another thing we tried last year was branded Jiffy stickers. There wasn't actually a strategy driving this. Our visitor experience team kept joking that we should make "Show Me the Monet" GIFs, but the social team and the graphic design team thought it was a brilliant idea and went forward with it. Our designer also made some water lilies, our logo, and this fabulous gif of Monet tapping his feet. We also try to make our highlight section a resource for visitors because Instagram is the new homepage, and I will live and die by that statement. Like our website's homepage, we want to be as helpful as possible. Our highlights have our open hours, how to buy tickets, what's on view, what's opening soon, and so forth. Later today, I invite you to check out our highlights on @DeYoung Museum and @Legion of Honor to see the full range of the way we use stories, which are not all included here in this presentation. Now, why do we spend so much staff time and resources for stories, which only last 24 hours? Just take a look at these comments. Once we started giving stories some effort, we immediately saw an overwhelmingly positive response. And we now make Instagram stories specifically with the visitors in mind. For example, when I'm monitoring tagged posts in our comment section, I'm looking at the type of questions that visitors are asking, objects that catch a visitor's eye but don't have much in-gallery explanation. This really informs the planning process. And that's what I find is the best part about working in social media, being able to get that real-time, candid feedback from visitors and being able to serve them with purpose. Now, on to best practices. I can't stress this enough. Please keep your story to 5 to 7 slides max. Sometimes we go over, it's fine, but we try to keep this as our general rule of thumb. Think about it this way. Would you tap through a story that was 30 slides long? No, you wouldn't, probably. Social media attention spans are very, very short. Next, always post in vertical orientation. If you're asking people to take photos for you, remind them to take them in vertical. And if the photos you receive are horizontal, most of the time you can crop it to a 9:16 ratio like we see here. Let your photos and videos tell the story. If you're familiar with our stories, you'll see that I like to mix it up with stills, time lapses, and boomerangs, just to keep the viewer surprised and wanting to keep watching. Keep your captions very bite-sized, as the viewer only has a few seconds to digest it. And lastly, use fonts and colors with intention. And now for putting the story in Instagram stories. We plan each story about a month in advance, and we write our captions and desired visuals in a storyboard. Each story should start with hooking viewers in, followed by your main message, and end with a call to action. Here's the beginning, the middle, and the conclusion. Now, in practice, here is the beginning of a story we did. We're hooking them in and getting them to keep watching our story. Here's the middle, the meat of the story, the point we're trying to make. And most of the time, we end with a call to action. What is the visitor now going to do with the information we just provided? On the shorter side, Here's an example of a 3-slide story we did to promote a new acquisition. I simply took these photos with an iPhone, pulled keywords from the wall label that I felt were most interesting to the viewer. And here's the story broken down. You can see how it would look in a storyboard. I'll take a couple of questions from the audience now. I see a couple in the chat. One from Erica. Swipe up is only available if you have a certain number of followers. Yes, that is correct. And if you're a registered business account. Thank you for bringing that up. Our accounts were already set up with swipe ups when I began doing this job. So I don't really know how to get set up that way. I hear like mixed things in like various Facebook groups, but there's probably more information on the Instagram Help Center webpage. Another hack you can do to this is just add a link in bio, but we don't always swipe up for Instagram stories because I think people don't really want to like leave the app to go read more. So like usually when we're sharing important links, we share them on Twitter and Facebook. Yes, I use just a couple of different apps every day, which I have a slide ready for you in a couple of slides. Thank you for asking. Okay, we have another question from Elisa Wong. How often do you think museums should be posting to stories? The industry average is 2.5 times per week. I don't know what the half means, but 1 to 2 should be fine based on the size of your organization. The DeYoung, prior to shelter in place, things are a little different for us now because we have less to communicate because the museums are closed. But prior to shelter in place for the last almost 2 years, the DeYoung was posting 3 times a week and the Legion was posting 2 times a week. So because that's me managing social media for 2 museums, I would do DeYoung Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Legion Tuesday and Thursday. And that kind of gets your followers in the habit of like expecting something new from you on those days. A question from Maria. I'm sorry I'm a bit late. I don't understand stories. If you already covered this, I will rewatch it if it's available. Yes, the first few slides went into the value that Instagram stories brings to your overall social media presence, and this talk will be available on YouTube after. Question from Nina. Hi, Nina. Nina's actually a former intern of mine. Do you have any general rules or tips when it comes to reposting visitors' stories or posts? Yes. It's actually like a pet peeve of mine when people repost a mention with no context. So a hack that I would do is be like, say there's a large event at the museum, for example, free Saturdays at the DeYoung. That's when we have all of our public programs. What I would do if I were in this situation would be to have the DeYoung post something and then have another slide that's like, we love seeing what you guys post, and then repost a series of mentions from your visitors' Instagram stories. And when reposting user-generated content, so the Legion of Honor, if you haven't been, it's like the most gorgeous, like photogenic spot in San Francisco. People come there just to take photos in the Court of Honor. So once in a while, we'll do an Instagram story like, we're loving how you see the Legion of Honor, and we'll repost like 5 to 7 different photos from people's feeds that have tagged us. And that's also a nice way of encouraging people to tag you and to engage with your profile. I'm going to answer one more question, and then we'll continue with the presentation. And we also have another Q&A session at the end. Thoughts on cross-sharing IG stories to Facebook stories. This is something that's on our to-do list to look into as well. We haven't done it yet. I think it's because our Facebook audience, the demographics there are so drastically different from our Instagram story audience. So we like to have tailored content for each platform just to really maximize the return on investment. Thank you guys for your wonderful comments. We'll save a couple more for the end. Now, on to the bells and whistles of Instagram stories. Stickers. Stickers are a great way of getting people to stop and engage with your story rather than just tapping through. They can vote on a poll, take part in a quiz, or even ask questions and submit responses. One question museum marketers may be challenged with is, should we brand our stories? There's pros and cons to each, but the bottom line is that even the biggest businesses in the world, like Vogue, Nordstrom, are using the native features in the app. Consumers prefer this anyway. No one wants to always feel like they're watching a commercial. If you like a cohesive look for your stories, I suggest using the same fonts in your brand colors in your story, or using a simple border in your brand colors from a third-party app. Speaking of apps, here are my daily go-tos. I use Visco for soft edits. Ironically, I edit everything to make it look more natural because I use a mix of professional and iPhone photography or photos taken by other staff members. So this gives everything a uniform look. I love the Retouch app for blurring out clutter like wall labels, stanchions, and exit signs. And I like to use the Unfold app for making collages when I need to condense a story or showing before and after photos in one slide. Now again, what stories are we telling on Instagram stories? On any given day, you'll see the following being shared by your favorite museums across the country, our museum included. Nothing's wrong with this. We're in the same industry, we're selling the same product, but what would make a visitor motivated to keep watching your stories? Here's what you can do to stand out. You can start to share staff member perspectives, influencer takeovers, figures, sites, and resources in your community, or you can use the question stickers to ask your followers what they want to see. Here's an example of how we promoted our neighbors in Golden Gate Park while tying it back to our Monet exhibition last year. We showed people where they could see the subjects of Monet's paintings in their own town. I'll just give you a second to look at it. And here's the second half to that story. No shade to any of these museums, but I'm hoping this illustrates my point of how Instagram stories can make you stand out from the crowd. The night before the CAM conference back in March, I was putting my finishing touches on this deck. I took an Instagram break, and these were literally the back-to-back stories on my screen. So you can see we have very similar messaging in our industry. But whatever content themes that you decide to follow, just make sure it always inspires and educates above all and retains the integrity of the museums. Don't get too swayed by memes and other viral internet trends. Lastly, once you get your content themes in great shape, it's time to start updating your highlight section. I love this example from the Fondazione Prada in Milan. As I mentioned before, Instagram is the new homepage. Turn it into a resource for your visitors. What do they need to know about your museum? Uniform highlight icons are an easy way to make your profile look polished. And there are a lot of free online design resources that can help you make custom graphics if you don't have a graphic design department. Now, moving on to metrics. Because Instagram stories is supposed to be a creative space and not a selling space, the engagement numbers might seem smaller than that of other channels, but that's okay. I won't get into which metrics specifically that you should track because that should be based with your organization's goals, but here's what you could see. Oh, just a reminder, if you have questions, please use the Q&A button on your Zoom so that our panel can track all of them. So what did we all learn today? If there's anything I hope you take away from today's workshop, it's these 3 things. Make Instagram stories part of your weekly routine. You don't have to do everything at once. Remember, it's called breadcrumbs. Use Instagram stories to highlight what makes your museum unique and special. And lastly, have fun, because they only last 24 hours. So now we'll have our Q&A, and I want to open it up to everyone to send in questions or any real world challenges you're currently facing, and open it up for the entire group to discuss. I'll pull up the Q&A form. Celeste asked, do you have a different approach for covering live events versus encouraging followers to visit the museum? That's a great question. we kind of see them go hand in hand with another. We have programs and events almost every day or every week, well, prior to coronavirus. So we weren't promoting every single event, but definitely we are in a larger institutional conversation about what takes precedence over another. So if there's like A+ level event, we'll do teasers throughout the week to sell tickets. And then the day of the event, we'll do live event coverage. And that could look like interviewing the special guest or just doing like a 5-slide roundup of like what you missed. Hope that answers your question. The next question is how to deal with copyright and use when posting on stories. That is definitely tricky territory. I know not everyone is in this position, but the Fine Arts Museums has an image rights specialist who logs all of this for us, and I always consult them before. We have a spreadsheet that shows us what photos cannot be used. But I understand that that is a real world problem. We don't always have that problem because a lot of our, we don't have a lot of living artists in our collection as opposed to, I would say, like maybe the Broad or SF MoMA. And then if I'm ripping stuff off from Flickr or Wikipedia, I just always make sure before I search, I'm looking under the free and fair use tagged images. The next question from Erica, how do you insert stickers and see answers after users have engaged with content? When you pull up your analytics in your story, you can see how many sticker taps you have. And when you're doing a poll, it shows you the number of people and which visitors interacted in your poll. I hope that answers your question, but please feel free to send a follow-up question. And another question from Erica, do you lay out all of your story imagery on your mobile device, or do you use Illustrator and InDesign to format some of the content before moving it to mobile? I found it can be challenging to do a lot of this on a small screen. Yes, I do everything on the phone. We have a Finsta that I use to route things through my manager, who just to make sure everything looks good to her. Or sometimes when I'm storyboarding, I have this like idea in my head, but when it's applied, it doesn't look that great. So I just post everything there. Yeah, I understand that it's really hard doing a lot of things on a screen. I'm literally like this all day long. I went to the chiropractor yesterday and told him about like this is my job. Yes, I said Finsta as in fake Insta. It's really helpful. And it was also really helpful when we practice doing Instagram lives with people. I'm glad you think that's funny. I think it's funny too. Just gonna go through the chat again and make sure I didn't miss anyone's questions. But if you have a question that wasn't answered, please feel free to put it in the Q&A. Donna asked Insta, what is Insta? Insta is short for Instagram. Finsta is fake Instagram. So we don't have any followers except myself and my manager, and we use that to mock up our posts. Lacey, are we good on time?
Yes, we have plenty of time.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Really having fun answering all your questions. So Anonymous asked, what's your background? How did you get into your current job? That's a great question. I've always had a strong interest in social media. Like when I was in middle school, I was like obsessed with like my MySpace and like making sure I had the perfect like outward facing profile that was a reflection of me. And it was really exciting in undergrad to see that that could turn into a career. So the professional way of answering this question is that I majored in broadcast and electronic communication arts at San Francisco State University. It's one of the leading programs for media studies. And there I learned about a lot about online media and this, like, as we were moving into the digital frontier back in the late 2000s or the 2010 on era. And then I started interning freshman year at a magazine called Where San Francisco. And because I felt like I was like really social media savvy, I asked to help with the Twitter, the Tumblr, and the Facebook posts. And this is like before Insta. And then after that, I decided I wanted to get into PR. So I interned at a boutique public relations agency called Ruby Press in Oakland. And then after that, I felt like I saw an opening at the De Young Museum for their PR team. And I applied, got it. And then I was assisting the social media manager 50% of the time. And then I thought, if this was like my full-time job, we could do so much more. So I made a proposal to the directors of our team to make my position a full-time position. Thank you for asking that. Using photos of people in the museum with art in the background or posting with it avoids the copyright issue, right? To my understanding, yes. A question from Samantha. Do you have any social media calendar or software recommendations? So we use a software called Falcon to publish, but it's very expensive. It's about $14,000 a year. But we love it because it's also a community management tool. So we can see all of our mentions, and we can I use it to route things to my manager and to our publication department before it goes live. And for calendaring, we simply use Google Sheets. And then another question from Anonymous, thoughts on getting permission when using user-generated content. I always DM the person and ask, we'd love to repost this. Can you share? We'll tag you, of course, and they get so excited. So I've actually never seen a problem with that. But yes, definitely always ask people for their permission. And just use a lot of nice heart emojis, smiley emojis to be as friendly as possible. That looks like all the questions that were sent in. Is there another slide that someone wants to go back to? We just have like 10, 15 minutes left. Oh, what app do you recommend for reposting? Do you mean downloading the visitor's photo? I'm going to assume that's what you mean. I can't remember the name of the website, but there is a website that lets you download visitors' Instagram photos. You just type in the URL and paste it, and it downloads as a JPEG. The name escapes me right now, and oh, you can see my slides. Oh, it's called downloadgrab.com. I'll type it in the chat. If I can find it. Okay, I'll quickly go back to the strategy slides. So Rhiannon requested to see the overall strategy slides again. So this is our approach to social media. And then this is our blueprint. The next question was, have you stumbled into any controversies with your content? I mean, it's a tricky question. We put a lot of thought into consideration with every post, but of course, there's been a couple of times where we were wrong, but thankfully, that's not a problem we run into a lot. And if we do, we try to listen to the visitor and make corrections and make sure that they feel seen, appreciated, and heard. Katie asks, hi Joyce, can you talk a little bit about how your team developed the strategy blueprint? Yes, I will. And that's probably the last question that we have time for today. Funny story, as I mentioned, we like to look outside of the museum industry for tips and tricks. So I attended a conference a couple years ago in November, and I went to this content presentation by a couple of people. I think it was, I don't even remember where the panelists were from. One of them was Pinterest. I think that's what piqued my interest. And the other one was a pharmaceutical company. And the pharmaceutical company actually showed this on their slide. And I was like, wow, that's going to solve all of our problems once we start implementing this. So I borrowed this concept from a pharmaceutical company, and this was what we came up with, and we passed this out to everyone. It's like to everyone on staff who has questions about social media. It's like the easiest way to communicate like what's all in here. And this was put together after several months of very deep analysis and research on follower behavior, engagement trends, and industry standards. And it's really, it sets boundaries for us on what we will post and what we won't post. So it might look different at your institution. Oh, I have a couple more slides for you at the end. Speaking of resources, I do have a couple of references that I'm excited to share with you. I can also, we can also share these links via email after the presentation. So thank you for joining me today. Let's stay in touch. You can follow the DeYoung and Legion of Honor. You can always DM us there. That's me reading all of them. This is my email address. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Joyce. That was so great, and I'm sure super helpful for everyone participating. I know we're getting a lot of thank yous in the chat box. Just want to thank you on behalf of CAM for presenting this webinar today and sharing your knowledge and expertise with our community. It is I love what you said about Instagram being the homepage, because it is so true and becoming increasingly more true.
Yes.
So thank you, Eleanor. Great. And well, I know we still have a couple of minutes while, if you don't mind, while people are still on, I'll just give a brief plug for the other series we have coming up. We hope that you loved Joyce's presentation today, and we have a couple more in our Lunch and Learn series that are still available for free registration. This week, Thursday, we have one of our CAM fellows giving their case study of about museum education and how museums can partner with classrooms. Next week, we have a webinar about evaluation and using standardized tools to evaluate the visitor experience, and then our final CAM fellow case study on the 23rd. So we are really grateful for everyone that has participated today and who's been participating in our Lunch and Learn program. And just one more big thank you to Joyce.
Thank you for having me and giving me this platform, and of course for all the amazing work that you do to support our museum. And to you, all my museum colleagues, thank you for all that you do to preserve and protect our culture, arts and culture in California.
Great. And Rhiannon asks in the Q&A, are past webinars available for viewing on a public-facing site like YouTube? And the answer is yes. Most of our webinars are available for viewing on YouTube. And I will send all the registrants of this webinar the link to view this recording when it is ready. And from that YouTube channel, you can see the past webinars that are available.